In the bustling streets of late 18th century Frankfurt, Germany, a young Meyer Amschel Rothschild was already showing signs of brilliance far beyond his years. Born into a modest Jewish family, Meyer grew up in a time when opportunities were scarce, especially for Jewish communities confined to ghettos and restricted by societal prejudice. Despite these limitations, Meyer's sharp mind and relentless curiosity set him apart from the other children. While most were learning trades or working for merchants, Meyer studied coins, currencies, and the intricate workings of commerce. Fascinated by how money could flow across borders and wield influence over kingdoms, Frankfurt was a city of contrasts. Wealthy merchants and aristocrats enjoyed privileges, while ordinary families struggled to make ends meet. But young Meyer saw not just the hardships, but the possibilities hidden within them. He learned the art of negotiation from local traders and developed an almost instinctive understanding of human behavior, a skill that would later become his secret weapon. Even as a boy, he understood that money was more than coins. It was power, and power could be leveraged through knowledge, timing, and cunning. By the time he became a young man, Meyer had begun working in the counting house of the Oppenheimer family, one of Frankfurt's prominent banking families. There, he absorbed lessons about credit, investments, and international trade. He saw how fortunes were made and lost, not through sheer wealth, but through strategy and foresight. The financial world fascinated him, but Meyer was not content with merely being a small-time banker. He dreamed of building a legacy, something far greater than himself, a family enterprise that could transcend generations and borders. This was also a time of upheaval in Europe. The French Revolution was shaking the continent. Old monarchies were being challenged, and Napoleon Bonaparte's rise to power promised both chaos and opportunity. Wars would disrupt trade routes, governments would need loans, and fortunes could be won or lost in a single battle. Meyer understood that in such a volatile world, knowledge and speed would be worth more than armies. He began thinking strategically, imagining a network of his family members spread across key European cities, each acting as his eyes and ears, gathering information and seizing opportunities before anyone else could. Amid these dreams, Meyer also focused on his family. He married Gottel Schnapper, a woman who shared his vision and determination, and together they raised their children with the same values: intelligence, discipline, and an unyielding ambition. The Rothschild household was not just a family home, it was a training ground for future financiers. Meyer's teachings emphasized the importance of secrecy, loyalty, and foresight. Lessons that would later allow the Rothschilds to outmaneuver kings and emperors. By the end of Part 1, the audience understands the foundation of the Rothschild story: humble beginnings, sharp intellect, and the vision to see beyond ordinary circumstances. Meyer Amschel Rothschild was no ordinary man. He was a strategist, a visionary, and a father preparing his family to become the most influential financial dynasty Europe had ever seen. Meyer Amschel Rothschild's brilliance was not limited to numbers. It extended to strategy, foresight, and family. By the time his sons were growing up, Meyer had already begun shaping a vision that would transform not only his family, but the financial landscape of Europe. He understood that to survive and thrive in a continent rocked by wars, revolutions, and economic upheavals, the Rothschilds needed more than talent, they needed a network. Not just a network of connections, but a network they controlled themselves. Meyer's plan was revolutionary. Each of his 5 sons would be sent to a key European city, each strategically positioned to gather intelligence, manage investments, and build influence. Amschel, the eldest, remained in Frankfurt, ensuring the family's roots were secure and handling local operations. Salomon went to Vienna, the heart of the Habsburg Empire, where politics and finance intersected in complex ways. Nathan, the most ambitious and daring, was sent to London, the rising financial powerhouse, where he would navigate government loans, war bonds, and the bustling stock exchange. Karl went to Naples, a city on the edge of European power struggles, and James to Paris, placing him close to Napoleon himself. At the epicenter of European conflict, the genius of Mayer's plan lay not just in placement, but in coordination. Despite physical distances, the family maintained constant communication using letters, couriers, and secret codes. They shared intelligence on markets, wars, and political shifts faster than anyone else could. Through this network, the Rothschilds could anticipate crises, exploit opportunities, and manipulate financial markets in ways that bewildered rivals. No other banking family operated with such precision, foresight, or secrecy. But this plan came with challenges. Each son faced local prejudice as Jewish bankers in predominantly Christian cities, rivals who were suspicious of newcomers, and political instability that could wipe out fortunes overnight. Nathan in London, for example, had to navigate the suspicion of English bankers and politicians while establishing trust and credibility. Karl in Naples confronted volatile governments and shifting alliances. Each son had to prove not only his intelligence, but also his resilience, patience, and ability to think several steps ahead. Mayer also instilled in his sons a set of core values: loyalty to family, discretion, and an understanding that timing was everything. Wealth alone was not enough. Knowledge was power, and speed could turn knowledge into an empire. The Rothschild sons learned to read not just markets, but people, their ambitions, fears, and weaknesses. This insight, combined with their financial acumen, made them almost untouchable. By the end of Part 2, the stage was set for a family that operated like a finely tuned machine. The Rothschilds were no longer just bankers, they were strategists, information masters, and pioneers of a financial empire that could outmaneuver even kings and emperors. The audience begins to see the brilliance of Mayer's vision: a single family spread across Europe, quietly gathering power and preparing to outsmart the forces of history itself, including the unstoppable rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. By the early 19th century, Europe was engulfed in chaos. Napoleon Bonaparte's armies were sweeping across the continent, toppling monarchies, redrawing borders, and creating unprecedented instability. For most, this was a time of fear and uncertainty. But for the Rothschild family, it was an opportunity. Mayer Amschel Rothschild's network, his son strategically positioned across Europe, was about to reveal its true power. Nathan Rothschild in London was at the center of this story. London, the heart of the British financial system, was bustling with news, speculation, and urgent decisions. Governments needed loans to fund wars, and fortunes could be made or lost overnight depending on information that few could access. Nathan, however, had an advantage no one else possessed: a network of couriers, informants, and family connections across Europe. Through his brothers in Paris, Vienna, Frankfurt, and Naples, he received news faster than any government official or rival banker could. The story reaches its climax with the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. Napoleon's final campaign to regain power created a tense, high-stakes environment. While armies clashed on the battlefield, the Rothschilds were quietly observing, analyzing, and preparing. Nathan reportedly received early intelligence of Napoleon's defeat from his agents in Belgium, before the British government and the public knew the outcome. This information was priceless, giving Nathan a head start that could be transformed into enormous financial gain. It was more than just knowing who won or lost. It was understanding the market reactions that would follow. Government bonds, which were extremely volatile during wartime, would surge in value with the news of Napoleon's defeat. Nathan needed to act swiftly, but carefully, to leverage this advantage without revealing that he had inside information. It was a delicate balance. Any misstep could ruin him or alert competitors to his extraordinary network. Meanwhile, his brothers across Europe were executing their roles with precision. In Paris, James monitored French financial movements. In Vienna, Salomon kept track of Austrian and Allied responses. Karl in Naples observed southern European markets. Amschel in Frankfurt coordinated communications and managed financial flows. Together, the brothers created an invisible web of intelligence, allowing Nathan to move strategically in London with almost surgical precision. By the end of this period, the Rothschilds had demonstrated what set them apart: speed, secrecy, and an ability to transform information into influence. They were not merely reacting to events, they were anticipating them. Through foresight and coordination, they had positioned themselves to exploit the chaos of war, a skill that would cement their reputation as Europe's most brilliant financiers. Part 3 shows the turning point in the Rothschild saga. The family's network was no longer just theoretical, it was battle-tested, highly effective, and ready to change the course of history. They were proving that intelligence, communication, and strategy could outsmart even the greatest military genius of the age, Napoleon Bonaparte. With news of Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo in his hands before the world knew, Nathan Rothschild faced a choice that would define not only his career, but the future of the entire family empire. This was not merely about wealth, it was about timing, strategy, and audacity. Acting too slowly would squander the advantage. Acting too quickly could reveal the secret behind his knowledge. Nathan had to execute a financial maneuver that would maximize profit while keeping rivals and governments unaware of his extraordinary edge. Nathan's strategy was audacious. He began quietly selling a portion of British government bonds, creating the illusion that he was panicking about Napoleon's potential victory. As rumors spread and other investors reacted in fear, prices of the bonds began to drop. The market, believing that Nathan was himself uncertain, followed suit. Meanwhile, Nathan's agents and family network monitored every reaction across Europe, ensuring that the plan stayed on course. Then came the decisive move. Nathan began purchasing massive amounts of undervalued bonds at rock-bottom prices. What had seemed like a market collapse was actually an orchestrated opportunity. When the true news of Napoleon's defeat finally reached the wider public, confidence in the British government surged and the bonds skyrocketed in value. Those who had sold in panic lost fortunes, while Nathan's calculated risk yielded unprecedented profits. In a single stroke, he had transformed secret intelligence into tangible wealth, outmaneuvering both rivals and nations. But this victory was about more than money. It demonstrated the power of information and timing. Nathan had shown that a well-coordinated network, strategic foresight, and bold action could outsmart even the most dominant political and military forces in Europe. The Rothschilds' mastery over information had become their most potent weapon, allowing them to operate above and beyond traditional markets and governments. Their reputation grew not only as bankers, but as almost mythical figures capable of bending financial forces to their will. Meanwhile, his brothers across Europe played critical supporting roles. James in Paris managed French financial movements to minimize risk. Salomon in Vienna watched the continental markets. Karl in Naples ensured liquidity in southern Europe. And Amschel in Frankfurt coordinated communications and reinvested profits. The precision and trust within the family network allowed Nathan to execute the plan flawlessly, showing that this was not a gamble but a product of meticulous preparation, intelligence, and unity. By the end of Part 4, the Rothschilds had achieved a milestone that few families in history could ever hope to match. They had transformed a moment of political upheaval into a decisive, profitable advantage, proving that intelligence and strategy could surpass armies and politics. This masterstroke laid the foundation for a financial empire that would span generations, showing the world that the Rothschilds were not just participants in history, they were architects of it. Captures the climax of the Rothschilds' cunning during the Napoleonic era, highlighting their combination of intelligence, daring, and coordinated strategy, and setting the stage for the empire building that follows in after the stunning financial success surrounding Waterloo. The Rothschild family's power and influence were no longer hidden. Their genius for intelligence, timing, and strategy had transformed them from a prominent banking family into a European financial powerhouse. But wealth alone was not their ultimate goal. Mayer Amschel Rothschild's vision extended far beyond personal fortune. The family now had the means and reputation to expand their influence across Europe, shaping economies and even governments in subtle but profound ways. The first step in this expansion was diversification. The Rothschilds invested in emerging industries such as railways, mining, and international trade. Railways were especially crucial. As Europe industrialized, controlling finance for infrastructure projects meant controlling the movement of goods, people, and wealth. Through careful investments, the family became indispensable partners to governments and industrialists alike, ensuring that their influence extended well beyond the confines of traditional banking. Equally important was their role in government finance. The Rothschilds became the go-to bankers for national loans, managing debt and stabilizing economies after years of war. Their reputation for reliability and discretion made them trusted advisors to monarchs and politicians who needed both capital and counsel. By providing financial support in critical moments, the Rothschilds were able to subtly shape political outcomes. This influence was never overt. It worked quietly, behind the scenes, giving them immense power without provoking jealousy or backlash. Family unity remained the key to their success. Each brother maintained his strategic position across Europe, ensuring that the Rothschilds' empire was coordinated and resilient. Nathan in London oversaw international investments and government loans. James in Paris managed French and European markets. Salomon in Vienna coordinated Central European operations. Karl in Naples handled Southern Europe. And Amschel in Frankfurt supervised the family headquarters. This division of labor allowed them to respond to opportunities and crises faster than any competitor or government could. The Rothschilds also mastered the art of discretion. They understood that visibility could attract envy and danger, so their operations often appeared modest to outsiders. By contrast, their actual influence was vast and meticulously managed. This combination of secrecy and strategic presence made them almost untouchable, enabling them to operate in multiple countries simultaneously and accumulate power quietly yet effectively. As their financial empire expanded, so too did their cultural and social influence. The Rothschilds became patrons of the arts, philanthropy, and education, further enhancing their reputation and embedding themselves into European society. Through these efforts, they built networks of loyalty and respect that complemented their financial dominance, ensuring that their legacy would endure for generations. By the end of Part 5, the Rothschilds had evolved from clever financiers to architects of a European economic empire. Their strategic use of wealth, intelligence, and networks allowed them not only to profit from the chaos of war, but to build lasting influence that shaped the continent. They had proven that real power did not require armies. It could be wielded with information, foresight, and the careful orchestration of resources, a lesson that would define their legacy for centuries. By the early 19th century, the Rothschild family had transformed from modest traders in a Frankfurt ghetto into a financial dynasty whose influence stretched across Europe. The events surrounding Waterloo had cemented their reputation, But it was the lessons they learned along the way about intelligence, timing, secrecy, and unity that ensured their enduring legacy. Their story was no longer just about wealth. It was about vision, strategy, and the ability to shape history without ever wielding a sword. The Rothschilds' influence extended far beyond their immediate financial dealings. By lending to governments, funding infrastructure projects, and investing in industry, they became indispensable to the development of Europe's modern economy. Their ability to act faster than competitors or even governments gave them a unique form of power. They could stabilize economies in crisis, manipulate markets with precision, and quietly guide the financial decisions of entire nations. Their empire was built not on force or coercion, but on intelligence, foresight, and strategic planning. Central to their success was the network that Mayer Amschel Rothschild had envisioned decades earlier. The placement of his sons in key cities, London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt, had allowed them to gather and act on information with unprecedented speed. The Waterloo episode was only one dramatic example, but it highlighted the principle that would define the family. Knowledge is power, and acting decisively on that knowledge can change the course of history. This strategy of coordinated intelligence became a hallmark of their operations, enabling them to outmaneuver rivals, survive political upheavals, and maintain influence across borders. Yet the Rothschild legacy was not just about finance. It was also about values. Mayer instilled discipline, secrecy, and loyalty in his family, teaching them that unity and trust were as important as intelligence. The brothers' collaboration, even in times of competition or disagreement, allowed the family to act as a single, cohesive force. Their discretion in public dealings ensured that they could wield influence without attracting dangerous attention. Balancing visibility with strategic invisibility, a lesson in subtle power that many rulers and generals failed to understand. The Rothschilds also understood the importance of cultural and philanthropic influence. Through art, education, and charitable work, they embedded themselves in the social fabric of Europe, building networks of respect and loyalty that complemented their financial power. By the time the 19th century progressed, the family had become symbols of intelligence, innovation, and strategic foresight, inspiring both admiration and myth. Rumors and legends about their wealth and influence only amplified their mystique, though the true secret of their power lay in planning, intelligence, and timing. Ultimately, the Rothschild story teaches that true influence comes not from brute force but from vision, strategy, and the disciplined execution of a plan. They had outsmarted one of history's greatest Melita,